two-sided aisles and nothing but Thundercats, Mr. And I looked at my wife and I said, "Oh, this show is a big hit." So that's one of the ways you know when there's something that kind of merchandise. The show is a big hit.
Larry, one of the things that I wanted to touch upon was the fact that, like, as you said before, you allow the writers and people like that to, to have time to write that stuff. Did you ever interact with all those people, like the writers, the animators?
We, over the 3 or 4 years that we were working regularly with Thundercats, Silverhawks, Tiger Sharks, we did an occasion meet some of the writers. They would pop into a recording session, Animators know because they were all from Japan, most of them from Japan. But I do remember meeting, I'm sure you've heard about Stephen Perry.
Yes, terrible.
Yeah, horrible thing.
We talked about it. We did a Thundercast episode the other day, and I interviewed him and around the same time that I interviewed you, actually, and just to think that he's not here with us anymore is
well, you
really
interviewed him. You talked to him?
I interviewed him.
Oh, wow.
I
know that you must have been shocked to hear that. Of course, we all were. And I do remember meeting Stephen. Stephen actually came to we used to have Christmas parties every year, all the cast and crew. And we go to after one of the days of recording 2 episodes near Christmas time, and we'd all got to have a Christmas party. And 2 or 3 of the writers came in, and I remember vividly that Stephen was at one of them, and just a great, brilliant guy, and it's a horrible thing that happened with him. So
I know one of the things that I was so shocked about was the fact that he was always so honest about things. Like, when I was interviewing him, that he was just really he just bore his soul out. It was like, yeah, this is what I think about it. It wasn't as if he was bitter, but it was like he respected me so much that he was able to basically tell me everything. And I knew he had personal problems and stuff, but I don't know if you were aware of that, Larry, when he sort of came out and said that he was on his ass, with his wife had left him and he was having some personal...
I had not heard anything about him since the 80s until he got murdered. Friends of mine have said, the people who are really into, they're people well like you and the people who work with your blog and your fans are the kind of people I think who follow, not just don't just watch the shows, but you do the interviews and you know what's going on in that world. I didn't know anything about his until I read. Of course, when the tragedy happened, then you read news articles about how he'd been down his luck and things. And I was sad to hear that.
What are your memories of him?
Just that he was, it was a party with 50 people, and so you didn't really, it was just cocktail chat and things like that. But I just remember that he was just a nice guy, and the fact that I remember him and remember his name tells you that he made an impression on me. But it was nothing like I can't tell you anything that we talked about or anything, But I just remember meeting him.
Well, Larry, let's move on. I wanted to talk about Earl Hammond for a second. From interviewing people that I did, he was such a legend in voice acting. He was so great. Just talk about some of the memories of working with Earl Hammond.
Well, I always tell people the greatest memory about Earl, it was so much fun to work with. He was a funny guy and a great talent. And, of course, he played Mum-Ra, the most dramatic character in the series, with that, and the funny thing is, if you remember what Mum-Ra looked like, Earl didn't look just like him, but when Mum-Ra began that transformation thing, and they got it closer, remember how there would be like drool coming out of his mouth and stuff like that?
It was scary as a kid. That was the major thing.
Yeah, it looked like some strange matter coming out. Well, the funny thing is that when Earl would do that, he spittle would come out of his mouth and run down his cheek, and he'd be going, he'd be wiping it away, and it became a joke with us is that we'd see 2 paragraphs ahead that Mum-Ra was going to start doing that, and all the actors would start moving their microphones to the corners of the room to get away from Earl, because not only would it come out of his mouth, but he would wipe it as he's talking and kind of flick it. I know it's not a very attractive thing to hear. I hope nobody's having dinner, but it was a joke with us. In fact, one day I think Lynn Lipton it was one day we had done one episode in the morning, then we used to break for lunch and come back. But she had looked at the second script for the day, and she saw that at the beginning the episode opened with Mum Ra doing that. So she came back from lunch with a plastic lobster bib, and held it over her head when he started doing that, and it broke her off. He had to stop and do another take.
One of my favourites, right? When I interviewed you, I hadn't watched the second series, and when I did watch the second series, I thought it was a little bit weirder. It was a little bit more cheesier.
Are you speaking of Silverhawks or?
No, the second series of
Tiger
Thundercats, when they started introducing all the new characters and had links. So
yeah, things that we thought too. Things got a little strange, but like with the birds and all that. You mean, and those kind of and the different kind of mutants. I forget what they call them. The
lunatics.
The lunatics, yeah. Well, I would imagine what happened is, like with any series, you if it's successful, great. But now then it becomes a little more difficult for the writers because you've got to come up with new situations for the characters and things. So, and you've got to come up with new, new angles and all that. So I would think, I'm not a writer, but I would think that once you've done 20 or 30 episodes, with most of the action being at Cat's lair or at Mum Ra's thing, what else are you going to do? So maybe they have a meeting and they say, let's bring in a different group of characters for him to fight. Let's make a different landscape. Let's make, different kinds of... I would think that's what would happen. You have to evolve. You can't keep doing the same... If you notice, television series do the same thing. Cop series, we have a thing here called Law and Order and all that. And I've noticed that after a few years, not only do new characters come in, but the show takes a little bit of a different turn. You kind of have to, or else, as much as people like the show, you don't want to sit and watch 10 years of the same thing over and over, right? That's my theory, and I'm sticking with it.
What are your thoughts then on the second series? Did you like it, or?
I liked it all the way through. I liked it. I don't believe any of the actors at least, ever got to a point where we said, I don't like the turn that is taking, or because our basic characters stayed the same. The Thundercats, you know what I'm saying? Nothing really changed with them, I don't think. Plus it gave us different characters to do.
I gotta say, Larry, one of my favourite parts about Thundercats was my brother actually mentioned this to me, and we were watching an episode once about it was a very early series, one episode, and it was Larry was sort of swimming in a pool, and the next thing you know, he's drowning because he's got cramp. So it's like, the line is, Snarf, I've got cramp. And then Snarf goes to save him, and it's a practical joke. When you were doing episodes...
I don't remember that. But, it's funny. It's funny, Nick, because I do a lot of these conventions. They call them Comic Cons. In fact, I'm going to Wales to do one in October. So it's like a 2 or 3 day long thing at a hotel somewhere. And you go and you sit at a table and you sign autographs for 2 days and then get up and give presentations. And there are people there, there are Star Trek people there. I met Star Wars, I met Mark Hamill at one. And the last one I did in Miami last year, there were a lot of the cast of Harry Potter, and we all sit in a big room and people come and buy autographs from you, And now I've forgotten my point. What did you ask me?
I think I asked you about what was it?
I don't remember. Why did I bring that?
Or something like that.
It had something to do with your question, I'll guarantee you. Well, it'll come to me.
Larry, I wanted to ask you about the Don Imus situation. I know you worked with Don Imus a lot.
35 years.
Yeah, I wanted to know your thoughts on sort of the events that he got fired, and then I think he got brought back, and there was... he got fired. Yeah, he said a thing on the air one day. The show was we were always pushing the limit, pushing the envelope. With our characters and the things he said, and people knew him for that. But one day, something slipped out of his mouth, and he still doesn't know why he said it. He referred to a group of African-American women college basketball players as nappy-headed hoes. And the uproar began, and the civil rights people, it got so blown out of proportion. And he got fired, and he was off the air for 8 months. And
one day he called me, and I really thought that he would retire because he was 60 some years old at the time, 65.